Welcome to another exciting and elucidating episode of the OmniTalk Ask an Expert series. I'm your host, Chris Walton.
And I'm Anne Mezzenga.
And we are the founders of OmniTalk, the fast-growing retail media outlet that is all about the companies, the technologies, and the people that are coming together to shape the future of retail. And I'm excited for today's discussion. And for those watching live, you can probably tell from the title, which is how to get your head around retail returns, because returns are what I would call, Anne, the omni-channel fulfillment thorn in what appears to be everyone's side at this point in time. Would you agree, Anne?
Without a doubt. Yes.
And so joining us to share his perspective and to help everyone get their arms or heads around returns, keep your arms, heads inside the moving vehicle at all times during this webinar, is Stipe Galic, the VP of Business Development and Marketing at TGW. Stipe, welcome to OmniTalk. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for sharing this time with me.
Yeah, we cannot wait to, we've been so excited to have you on. And I want to just give a quick reminder to all of those of you who are joining us live. You can ask your questions for Stipe, which we know there's going to be a lot of questions on returns. You could ask those in the chat session. To your right, just type it in and Stipe and the TGW team will do their best to get to all of your questions during the session. But Stipe, let's start out how we always do. Tell us a little bit about TGW for those who are joining us for the first time, and then your specific role at the company.
Perfect. So TGW is a warehouse automation and robotics provider. The company was founded more than 50 years in Austria and Europe. And I would say that's also where we experienced our first growth. But we are present in the US already also since around 15 years. And now in the last 3 years, we are really trying to boost this market and make it as big as Europe for us. So as of today, we're around the $1 billion company. We do 80% of our revenues in Europe and 20 in the US. So, and about my role, I'm a TGW kid somehow. You know, I started directly after school at TGW.
Did you really?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
My background is mechanical engineering, so I was drawing layouts, designing solutions, and I started exactly during the phase where TGW was moving away from being a pure technology provider to being really an integrator and working with the biggest brands, retailers, food companies, and really looking holistically how they can provide the most value within the four walls in their distribution center. So I had the chance to work with great teams all around the globe, with really big brands and learn a lot. And after that, I was also heading up parts of our R&D organization, the front end of it, really connecting the market to technical needs and translating it into the right language, I would say so. And then a bit more than 2 years ago, a team of us, would say, came to the US, and really we had already a team here and really joined forces to try to make America really big for TGW and boost the success here. So now since 2.5 years, I'm overseeing the front end of the organization. So it's really about early customer engagement, about consultation. And then the other part of it, which is quite new. I mean, I'm not a marketing person from a background perspective. I would say I'm quite good in dealing with customers. That's probably why I'm doing it. I'm telling the stories and I have a fantastic team who can do great stuff with it. So it's really about boosting this brand awareness, getting the TGW name out there so people know who we are and what we can contribute to their success.
That's great. See, but I don't know. The way you said that too, a TGW kid. I don't know if you know the reference, but Anne, you know, like when he grows up, he wants to be a TGW kid, I guess. You know,
I know.
Like the old, Toys R Us jingle.
I know. I actually pictured you like after school as a young child, Stipe, like not just after college or university, but like
that's
going
the
in and
picture you had in your head.
Yes, it is. It totally
awesome.
is. Yeah,
that's awesome.
But to be fair, I didn't go to university, so I was still quite a young child. So
wow.
So I made my way through the company really by working in a lot of different roles and getting a lot of different experiences. And a fun fact there, you know. Next to our TGW headquarters, we have a kindergarten. And when I bring my daughter there and she's just 3 or 4, she already tells me, you know, Dad, I'm going to work at TGW.
All right. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's awesome. All right. So let's get to it. So Now this question, Stipe, it might be basic for some of our watchers, but I think it's still a good place to start the interview, mainly for grounding purposes, particularly. Why have returns become such a challenge for retailers to handle, beyond the obvious, of course?
I mean, if I would choose just one word, is because of omnichannel. I think this omnichannel, everybody was chasing it, and you needed to develop in that direction. And then obviously with omnichannel, e-commerce came into the place. And then I think omnichannel comes with a lot of different challenges. And I mean, on the one side, in front of end consumers, a company always needs to be omnichannel. But in the back end, there is a lot of stuff going on, and very often a lot of different ways how to deal with that. In our field, if you look, for example, at the supply chain, you had companies who had distribution centers who are purely made for retail store replenishment. Then they had some DCs for purely e-commerce. Then you had companies who merged it under the roof but couldn't share inventory because they use different SKUs for each of them. And then it's a bit the new normal approach. The approach which we try to take is really put everything together, make it one true omnichannel thing which can deal with all these processes. But coming from the back, then you got the returns in, you got these Cs, which were maybe not having the capabilities to deal with this stuff. So you were putting stuff aside, dealing with it maybe later than you should, because bringing it fast back into inventory and be able to allocate against it is quite an important thing, I would say, for returns. And then I think, obviously, I mean, if you look at the fashion industry, which is one of our core elements also, I mean, the fashion is changing so fast. The cycles where you launch a fashion very often are very, 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 very short. I mean, there are a lot of technologies going out there trying to reduce returns by introducing maybe mirrors, maybe better sizing, maybe better comments, how to do all these things. But in the end, I feel it's quite difficult to follow these short cycles, how fashion brands want to launch stuff, and be attractive to the end consumers.
Talk us through step by step what that looks like as goods are coming back from the stores and e-commerce. How are the processes different? How are you helping them to make the most profit from their returns?
We built this distribution center which can handle all this stuff. Our customer in that case was Urban Outfitters, which they took quite a bold move to say, look, let's try this and let's build a true omnichannel distribution centers. And then if we talk about returns, when they come back into the distribution center, usually the way how we store SKUs is as single SKUs within totes. But when returns come back, we do all the inspections and all this stuff, and we put them together as mixed-SKU totes, because we don't want to wait that long to fill up a full tote with the same SKU, because we want to bring it as fast as possible back to the inventory. So we create mixed-SKU totes, which contain maybe 10 to 15 items, and put them back to storage and allow immediate allocation against it. Then on the one side, I mean, we can still always choose, hey, do we want to ship out of a single SKU tote, or do we want to ship a return out of a mixed SKU tote, depending what performance we need to achieve, because picking out of mixed SKU totes and picking returns is a bit slower than it is, picking out of single SKUs. So we can always balance this out to make sure that the system performs in the best possible way and gets the items out of the door, which is in the end the most important thing to meet the SLAs.
And how do you make that determination then? So it sounds like as the returns come in, you're putting them in mixed return totes. Like how do you make the determination of how best to pick them should you want to sell them again?
I mean, in general, from an automation perspective, we would always choose the strategy, empty the inventory totes to get them out and get new inventory back. So I think we would always choose to empty up multi-SKU totes with returns, because for a cubic feet which they have, they store the least amount of items. So we try to empty them up. The only way where we would not choose them to do so is if we see, hey, we are really hitting a peak in terms of items which we need to process, and we believe we are much faster by taking single SKU cases. That's where we would run for single SKU. But it needs to be a clever balance, because as I said before, data shows us that if we can make sure that we ship this stuff out, it really sells a lot in the first couple of days. So we need to make sure that we can use them.
So then, like always in these conversations, and Stipe, back to you again, like software is a key piece of this then, because you have to understand the dynamics here of understanding those cycle times in terms of the picks and the demand and the volume movement going out of that building to be able to decide, okay, where do we want to pick these returns from, whether it's current shelf stock or the actual return stock. Is that right?
Exactly. So it's really, software plays a big role in there. Even though TGW as a company, we focused on fashion a lot, and we started an initiative where we really looked at these things and with multiple retailers and brands. And I would say software packages as of today include these as standard elements about choosing, what's the right thing based on the output and the SLAs needed.
So from my perspective, what I took from you is the omni-channel way with which retailers do business is really exacerbated the problem, that it goes beyond just the proliferation of e-commerce. It's really the omni-channel nature of it, and that being the products being returned via the stores back into the channels, as well as via e-commerce back into the channels. And particularly that's really profound because of the way that most retailers have set up their infrastructure. Is that right? So like most retailers are set up to process their shipments via e-commerce channels or to the stores. And so returns throw a big wrench in that. That's essentially what you're saying?
Exactly. And I think on top of that, on the one side, it's obviously the supply chain aspect, but on the other side, it's really the fight for competitiveness. You need to provide this omnichannel experience. So it's not really a question, do you want or you don't want? It's really how you're going to make it possible that you get the seamless experience, but on the other side, you can still keep it profitable. I mean, this is the clue behind it, I would say.
Stipe, that makes sense if we're thinking about this, taking an omni-channel approach, making sure that we're set up to accommodate, both the online returns and the in-store returns. But it all sounds kind of daunting. I mean, what advice do you have for how these retailers can process these returns more profitably and more efficiently?
I think it's really about taking a holistic view on it. What do you need to process from all aspects, and then trying a way to merge this together. I mean, if we take a step back, previously the way how you were dealing with this stuff, you might have a retail DC, you might have an e-commerce DC, you might have a returns handling, maybe even outsourced to a 3PL or whatever this might be, but a very fragmented things. And to be honest, it was the right choice maybe at that moment, because the volumes were that high, maybe the fluctuations between the channels were not at that level and so on. But as of today, we would say this industry gets quite unpredictable. So this means you need to get something in place which can deal with all of it at any time, in any share in this case. So our recommendation would really be to build a process flow which requires as less touches as possible, to use goods-to-person solutions as order fulfillment systems, which can deal with e-commerce, retail, returns, wholesale, any distribution channel at any time, and try to put in as much possible as the business allows. Because in the end, to make these business cases, it's really about high utilization. So you need to make sure to keep the utilization high at these systems, and that's where they pay back. And if you look at processing unit curves for e-commerce, for retail, for wholesale, or even how returns come in, they all are a bit different. So if you find a very clever logic, you can stack them up, and actually without cannibalizing each other, they actually add on each other and just make you even more profitable. So I think it's really about the holistic view, merging all these flows together into one, and making sure that you are really, really responsive. Your responsiveness matters much more than speed just. And maybe to use an analogy to it, we say that what we do is a bridge principle. So every car represents a retail order, an e-commerce order, a return coming in, a wholesale order, and everything needs to flow continuously. There should not be any dependencies in between them. And previously, the way our systems were built were much more like ferry systems. Everything comes together, they wait till the boat is there, they get on the boat, and they get on the other side. It does the job, but not really flexible and not responsive as it should be.
Got it.
Right.
I love that analogy. So cars versus ferries. So you're basically saying that, in a nutshell, that the idea here is you got to merge your systems. You got to find a way to merge the operations at the distribution center level. So I'm curious then, I want to understand, okay, if somebody does that, what does that actually look like? How are the processes different before versus post making that effort? And do you have a good example you can share of someone you're working with that is doing that?
I will give you an example of a high-value fashion brand. I can't say the name right now, but the way how they were set up, they had a retail DC, they had an e-commerce DC, and dealt with these things completely separately. So they came to us, or we came to them, and they started discussing how we can boost their store replenishment part. And in the end, I mean, they had an 800,000 square feet distribution centers, and just 100,000 square feet were really available to do something to boost throughput and increase profitability at the same time. So when we started putting in the solution, looking at the data, what's going on there, at one moment we said, but what if we take a look and try to include also these e-commerce volumes out of the separate distribution center on this side? And that's how this journey started. And then suddenly when we added up all these processing capabilities and what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, actually we recognized it's just adding to the business case. It's not really taking away, because we can use the same SKUs, so we don't need to hold that much inventory in both DCs. We can do it just at one stuff, and at the same time allow for extremely fast processing. Previously, you would walk into such a DC, everything would be manual, a lot of touches at the inbound, people would be climbing racks to get stuff out, they would do manual picking, then they would do sortation afterwards, and then ship this stuff. So a lot of people involved. I would call it a bit of a zigzag process flow through the warehouse. And now what we are trying to do for them is really merge these channels and build a clear line how product needs to flow through this disease.
Got it. So that's it. So is this an approach you would advise everyone to take then? So like, should everyone just ship their store returns and back to the same place that their e-commerce returns are coming as well? Like, is that just a general good approach? Because it sounds like channel agnostic, like what you're espousing. Like, what am I missing? Or is that what you would say?
I mean, I think obviously it depends at which stage you are as a company and what kind of profit or revenues you're making. But I would recommend any big enough retailer to take this into consideration. There might be other reasons based on historical things or whatever that this will not work, but I think there is really a good chance to make this work for anybody who really has the power and capabilities to take a look at, because supply chain used to be a cost, in this environment very often, distribution centers. But I think if you look at the biggest brands in the world, I mean, look at Inditex, look at even Amazon in this case, supply chain is an asset there. And the reason why it's an asset is because they are dealing with it. They want to have it in their hands and making sure, hey, I can utilize it in the best possible way. And we are trying to give them solutions which provide what we call really true flexibility, where they can choose, hey, how do I need to process my orders? What is the responsiveness I need? What are urgent orders? When do I process what to make sure the business really gets out of this what they need?
I'm wondering, as fashion and apparel retailers specifically are using tools to help produce and get garments from concept phase to rollout, and now some companies, Walmart just announced they're doing this in like 6 to 12 weeks. How is that changing how retailers need to be thinking about returns and processing the existing product that they have, on their website, in their stores, and that they're trying to get through? Are you seeing more retailers kind of move towards an investment in a faster and more responsive back or processing center for these returns, because they've got product that seems to be coming out at a much higher frequency these days?
I mean, look, one of our customers is Inditex already since more than 20 years. And I think they are the champions in terms of fast fashion, if you look at it. So,
right.
But still, if you would ask Inditex, I mean, the supply chain is a massive asset for them. They look at it as an asset. They don't look at it as a cost. And I think that's a transition which is already quite far, to be honest, in this fashion retail environment. But I think, for example, Inditex recognized that also years ago, supply chain is a critical asset to make sure that this is possible. Because if you can design, develop, and build the clothes, you need to make sure to be able to be as fast in getting them at the right place, at the right time. And that's a crucial thing. So I do believe that the investments there will need to happen. And then there are different ways you can run in a more or less automated way. So I'm not saying that it's really just fully automation and hundreds of millions of investment. There are different steps you can take from lower investment and then scale these things up as they grow. And I don't think it's a one-shot thing. I think we look at it like, hey, let's make a step which enables you to do that and really creates a backbone, and then let this backbone grow as your business grows in the end.
What are some of the outcomes that some of these retailers are seeing once they have automation in play? Where are the areas that they're able to deploy that? And then what are some of the results that they've seen?
I think the results, I mean, starting with the cost thing of it, if you look at the cost per piece, because I would say that's the most important metric for most of them, they cut it nearly by half by doing that. And really it comes together to lifting into utilization of a seamless process flow. Second thing is the footprint which they need in terms of square feet is much less. But also very important, it's when you see people working in these distribution centers, it's a completely different environment. And I mean, I'm going to share you an example. We talked about Urban Outfitters. When Urban Outfitters opened up the DC, I talked to their senior director of fulfillment, and she told me, I used to work at a lot of companies, and when I tried to hire people, it took me quite a long time to get them in, And now with your solutions and the automation you have built in, I have a queue of people waiting outside of distribution centers saying, hey, I really want to work there because it's a nice touch between human and technology. It's it's a nice working environment. And that makes a difference, in my opinion, also.
Well, and how has this changed like the store's operations and like order flow and that kind of thing too? Because I imagine as a result of the people, the automation coming into play to support some of those more mundane tasks that people were doing, I imagine that the speed to get product back to market is also helping change, how much product needs to be made in the first place, perhaps.
Definitely. I think exactly it helps that. It helps you to keep as less inventory as possible, because if you run multiple distribution centers, you will need a lot of inventory stored everywhere, and it's quite tricky to keep it accurate. So I think that's a cost on it. And I think it's really this responsiveness thing which allows you to make sure you have the right inventory in stores, you have the right inventory in your distribution centers, and that's how you can best serve your customers in the best possible way for, in the end, the best possible costs.
Yeah. Goes back to what Connie said before too, discrete ordering versus batching, or the ferry versus the car analogy as well,
Yeah, and maybe just to add on that, I mean, this ferry versus bridge thing is the bridge thing. The main driver for that is really the unpredictability of it, and we saw that. We had customers who built solutions like I was talking about, and during Corona, they were built to do 80 or 90% of their business in retail via stores, and just 10% via e-commerce. But they had these solutions in place, and during Corona, it switched completely. And these solutions were just processing e-commerce for them, and we had a funny conversation because luckily we bought it and established it because they didn't care if it's retail or e-commerce, because they were possible to process any of it.
Right. Yeah. Bridge versus ferry. Yeah. I mean, the other point too that I'd make here, from what I'm taking away from you, is this isn't a hard thing to try either. Like you could just, like you said, you just take a section of the warehouse, and automation is really the first way you hit automation is probably through software on this, right? The goods are coming in the building. You have the software that helps you decide where to put them. Then you can get fancier with the automation. But at the end of the day, you're just taking a piece of the warehouse. You're putting whatever human labor you need to until you understand the actual puts and takes with even greater forms of automation, and you just start doing it this way, and you start to learn the value and the value that can be gained from the approach. Is that right in closing, Stipe, or is there anything you'd add here in terms of what you want people to finally take away from this discussion?
I think you're absolutely right. Very often people think about it, hey, it's a massive investment which you need to do to really get the journey started. And I do believe, you can start on a small scale, and this system can grow as your business grows and as you learn. But what we definitely see when you start with it, it grows extremely fast because you see the profitability of it, and also you see how great it is for people to work with it in the end. And the last thing of advice, what I would recommend people is really to take a holistic view on that. I think the biggest issue which we very often see is that we are chasing islands of automation. We want to create a great automation solution for returns and a great one for e-commerce and a great one for retail. But it's really about being agnostic and making sure it's placed seamlessly together. That's much more important than to have the best possible automation in one segment. And I'm going to share one insight with you. We are hosting some events, and we had 25 VPs, C-level, senior directors of retailers in the room. And I asked the question, and I asked the same question a couple of years ago. I asked, if you could choose cutting edge technology versus seamless integration, what would you choose as of today? And finally, 90% of them said today it's seamless integration. Looking 5-6 years back, this was completely different because everybody was chasing cutting edge technology. But I think we all learned our lessons out of this. And really this holistic view and the seamless integration in the process, that's what makes a difference.
That's a great nugget to end on because, yeah, back in the day, like the business model wasn't evolving to the degree it is. And so now you have to take this approach to be successful, which is why we have Omni in our name. And we'll have Omni until the day, at least I die. I don't know if Anne feels the same way, but at least the day until I die, despite how much grief we sometimes take for it. So that's a great point to end on. Thanks, Stipe.
Yes. Thank you so much, Stipe, for taking the time today. I imagine there'll be lots of folks who want to reach out after this to connect with you directly. What's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn is the best place, I think. That's where you can reach me.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah. If you're watching now, just shoot him a DM. Slide into his DMs. That's how the kids say it today, right, Ann? Slide into Stipe's DMs.
I wouldn't know. I'll take
I
your
know,
word
right?
for
I
it.
have no idea either. No one slides into my DMs, Ann. No one slides into my DMs. But yeah, just shoot Stipe a message on LinkedIn. So thanks to Stipe Galic of TGW for sitting down with us. And as always, on behalf of all of us at Omni Talk Retail, to all of you listening live or watching live, I should say, or listening later, as always, be careful out there.